All right, hello everyone, and welcome. We are happy to be live here on our Zoom and on our Facebook, on our district Facebook page. My name is Brian Painter. I'm Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction for the district. I've had the great pleasure of serving our community for the last 23 years. The last 6 of those have been in this role, or 22 years, I guess. And we are joined today by Liz Grana, who is our Director of Instruction and Professional Learning, by Jenny Klinke-Galbraith, who is our district facilitator who supports English language arts in our district, and Elizabeth Locke, who is our MTSS coordinator, which stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, which you're going to hear more about soon. We're thrilled to have you here for our second of our 3 literacy power hours. Just if you're brand new to this or you just happen to be coming across this on Facebook, our first one was last week. It was at 9 o'clock in the morning. Today we're here over the lunch hour, and then on September 28th, we'll be joining with you at 6 p.m. so that we try to diversify and have different time frames so that we can make sure that any of our parents and community members, family members who want to join us at various times, we're able to do so. I'm also excited that we're going to be following up on our power hours with an episode of our new district podcast is going to be around literacy, comprehensive literacy, and specifically our literacy plan as well. Before we dive into a short presentation, I wanted to let everybody know that you do have the ability to ask questions here within our Zoom page. And then if you are following along on Facebook, you can also ask questions there. We'll do our best to answer those questions as we go along. We do have some resources we'll try to share with you either during this presentation or on our Facebook page, or our Facebook page, or our district website down the road here in the next few weeks. We have lots of great information that we can share with you, but we really rely on your questions. And so if you have questions that you want to ask, please do so, and we will continue. Probably the last 45 minutes or so of this hour that we have together is going to be trying to answer your questions or questions we've heard from other parents. So as we dive in, I'm going to go ahead. I can see we have, just so you all know, for our panelists, we have about 5 people who are with us right now on our Zoom, and I'm unable at the moment to see how many people are joining us on. It looks like 5 people are watching on Facebook as well. Hopefully it's not the same 5 people. So I'm going to share my screen here. I'll do my best to share my screen. All right, give me a thumbs up to our panelists if you can see this. All right, hopefully everybody can see it out there as well. So just as a reminder, these are our dates for our literacy power hours. As with everything else we do in the district, it's important for us to think first about our strategic plan. And I will assure you that even as we are writing our plans for this year and getting ready to have those presented to the board on September 27th, the literacy plan is very much a part of that work. Our comprehensive literacy efforts are a 3-year plan that we've been working on for roughly 6 months now. That will be continuing through the, I guess, 23-24 school year. We're excited about these efforts, and we know that it's going to make a difference for all of our kids across the district. These are the priority goal areas and guiding principles that are tied into our strategic plan, and I think you'll notice that there's quite a few connections between our literacy conversations and the work that's here. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny Klinke-Galbraith and let her continue discussing this. Dr. Galbraith, or Klinke-Galbraith, if you want to go ahead and take over here, I'll let you do that.
Sure. Well, thanks so much for joining, everyone. I think when we talk about comprehensive literacy in Kirkwood, we really think about how we build first those foundational blocks. So on this visual in particular, it's those red blocks of how do we make sure that we're supporting literacy so that all of our students can be proficient readers, writers, listeners, and speakers. And so really this year, and with our 3-year literacy plan, we're really focused in on those 5 essential components of supporting literacy. So phonemic awareness and phonics first and foremost. We've introduced our Sunday system in our K-5 classrooms, and so that's definitely a focus for this year in particular. So that leads to the fluency, vocabulary, and necessary comprehension to support those reading, writing, and speaking and listening blocks. So what that looks like for Kirkwood's K-5 literacy instruction are really those pieces that you'll see kind of highlighted in blue, where we have the reading mini lessons, phonemic awareness. So really what that teacher and student interaction looks like in the classroom. And then finally at the bottom, what resources our teachers and interventionists, administrators and facilitators use to support universal instruction for all of our students. So that's the Hegarty system for phonemic awareness, Sunday system, K5 for phonics, and the units of study in reading and writing. So all of those foundational pieces are really necessary in thinking about how we meet the needs of all of our readers, writers, speakers, and listeners. And I'm happy to speak about this as well. Elizabeth, did you want to share your thoughts on Scarboroughs Rope?
Sure. So thank you. Hello, everybody. Scarboroughs Rope is a great graphic, I think, to just remind us that reading really is a very complex skill. It's not just a simple thing. Learning to read is not simple at all. It's very complex. And in order for students to be what we call the skilled reader, which means they're fluent and can read without really thinking about the words, so to speak, that each one of these threads needs to be well developed. And so the bottom, the threads are really categorized into two different groups. We have the ones that are in blue fall under the word recognition category, which are things like the phonological awareness, the coding, and just being able to recognize words by sight. And those are also what we think of a lot of times as the foundational skills. Those are the focus of K1 and 2, along with the language comprehension, but really getting kids to really have those decoding skills and that phonological awareness. And then at the top in the orange threads are the language comprehension skills. So things like verbal reasoning, vocabulary, background knowledge, just things that kids know based on what they've been exposed to in their lives. All of those things go together. And if any one of those things is weak or the skills aren't as strong, then that's going to impact a child's ability to be a skilled reader. So just highlighting the importance of all the different skills that go together to make students skilled readers. And so this slide gives me a chance to talk a little bit about this idea of MTSS, or multi-tiered systems of support. So this is a framework that we've used in Kirkwood for a really long time. I'm proud to say we have really good structures in place, always room for growth, but we have a lot of great things going on. And the idea behind MTSS is that it's not a separate thing. It's really a framework for all the things that we do. And specifically, I'll kind of talk about through the literacy lens, but some terms that I want to make sure I bring up today, because they're new terms for the same things that we're doing, but we've kind of come up with some new terms. The first being this idea of universal support or universal instruction. Some of you might have heard the term Tier 1 in the past. But universal instruction is that instruction that all students receive in the classroom as part of that comprehensive literacy model that was just shared with us. And then a big part of MTSS is data. So we're collecting data on regular intervals with all of our students, and we're using that data to inform our next step. So one of the things that really has always spoken to me about this type of model is the idea that it's a very proactive instead of reactive. So instead of waiting for parents or teachers or someone to say, hey, I'm concerned about a student, we're collecting multiple types of data and we're looking at it at regular intervals. And when the data indicates that somebody might need something additional, we're acting on that. So that's where the next layer comes in. So 3 times a year in grades K through 8, we do screen all students in the area of literacy. And so based on that data, along with other sources, that some students might be identified for supplemental instruction. And you might have heard the word Tier 2 in the past. Now we're talking about that in terms of supplemental instruction, and supplemental instruction can happen in a lot of different ways and a lot of different places. So it's saying that students need something additional, but then we're going to spend some time with a team of people and figure out what exactly that something additional is. And it might be in the classroom with our classroom teacher, just doing an extra small group to work on a specific skill, or it might mean going with an instructional specialist to work, more directly, maybe more explicitly on a specific skill. And then just a few of our students may indicate that they need intensive support. And this might have been called tier 3. You might have heard the word tier 3 in the past, but that intensive support will definitely take place outside of the classroom and be very explicit, very direct, based on a specific need. And so we might use some additional assessments to help us figure out what the focus of that supplemental or intensive support might be for a student. And then once we've identified that a student needs that additional instruction, we're going to collect more data weekly or every other week to make sure that that additional instruction is working. And if it's not, if we're not seeing the kind of growth we hoped for, then we're going to get a group of people together and we're going to talk through that and figure out what we can change so that we can get the growth and that we hope to see. So I am going to jump in. There's a question that just came in on Facebook about what assessments do we use, since it's kind of tied exactly to that. So for our universal screening of all students in the area of reading, we use FastBridge assessments, but then there are additional assessments within FastBridge and or other diagnostic assessments that we can use with kiddos if we need to find out.
All right. I appreciate that very much. And thank you I see someone did ask that question on Facebook, and I appreciate that very much. Are there any other questions? I'm seeing no other questions yet here on our Zoom. And so you made my moderator job really easy by asking the question already. Okay, here's one. Do we test for dyslexia or eye tracking challenges? Great question, and we appreciate that. I'm going to pass that over to Jenna or Elizabeth.
Sure. Elizabeth, do you want to speak specifically about the testing aspect?
Sure. So we do, I guess a couple of thoughts I have here. We do screen all students. That screening process that I described also serves as our dyslexia screening. So if you're not aware, the state of Missouri put into place several years ago, I think this is our 3rd or 4th year of the legislation, that we have to screen all students grades K through 3 for dyslexia, and even students in grades above 3rd grade. If we see any kind of concerns or indicators, then we can do additional screenings with them as well. But the good news is the screening that we've always been doing in Kirkwood is the kind of screening that we would do for dyslexia as well. So that universal screening that we do with all, that is our dyslexia screening as well, because really dyslexia, as many of you probably know, is a medical term and it's a medical diagnosis. So it's not something that we would diagnose in the schools, but it is essentially in our world, it's a student who's struggling to read, right? And so by doing that preventative regular screening, ideally we're going to catch students, whether it's dyslexia officially or any other kind of problem with reading, we're going to catch them and be able to provide additional instruction to meet their needs.
Would it be helpful to show that assessment slide that we have? Trying to think if that, let's see. Well, I lost the slide. Let me pull that back up. Sorry. Well, okay. This is not working very well, but I'll pull that up here in a second, because I don't think you all need to see everything going on my screen here.
Please don't, don't leave the meeting. I guess one of the other things I might add for dyslexia is when we do see that a student is struggling with reading, or if a parent comes to us and says, my child has recently received a diagnosis of dyslexia, then we're certainly going to use that data along with all of our other data to plan some really great instruction for that student. But another important thing to remember is that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to students that are struggling with reading and or have a diagnosis of dyslexia. It's really, every student is different, right? Every student is unique and has a unique instructional need. And so we don't say, oh, you've received this diagnosis, you're going to get X, Y, or Z. We're really going to dig into the data for that student and determine what is the instructional need and how intense of a need is it. Because some students may just require some supplemental instruction in addition to that universal, and that might be what they need. Some students might need some very intensive instruction, and so then they would be able to receive that in addition to that universal instruction.
Absolutely. Okay, so we have two other questions here from the same person. We'll go to the second one first, just because I have the screen up. And it asks, what grade level do you stop assessing students in literacy? And I'm going to go ahead and put this up here, this slide up here, because it might help in this conversation.
Right. So an immediate answer, easy answer to your question is we never stop screening students. We're constantly gathering data. It's just the type of assessment that we're using might be different depending on the grade level. So as I mentioned, in grades K through 8, we're doing that universal screening, which would be that kind of navy-ish color there in the bottom left-hand corner. So all students K through 8 are getting universal screening assessments 3 times a year. In the upper kind of diagonal from that in the red is something called interim assessments. And those are standard specific assessments. So we've identified priority standards for the Kirkwood School District, and we have also developed assessments to measure those standards specifically. And so those are used in grades 3 through 8, and those are used 3 times a year, but at different times, different intervals than the universal screening assessments. And then, as I mentioned, the yellow, the progress monitoring assessments, those would be for students who we've identified that need some either supplemental or intensive instruction. They're going to get frequent, easy little temperature check assessments, I like to call them, to see if their instruction is working or not. But in that green, that just-in-time short cycle assessments, all teachers at all grade levels are constantly doing quick little check-ins. They're conferring with students, they're listening to students read, they're talking about reading, and so they're collecting that kind of data, which would be a little more informal in nature, but very important in part of this overall comprehensive approach. And even into high school, there are common formative assessments that are done. So we really never stop when it comes to assessing.
All right, thank you. Anything you wanted to add to that, Jenna?
No, I think exactly what Elizabeth was saying, that, we use FastBridge K through 8. And so when you say, when do we stop assessing students, we use FastBridge through 8th grade. And then we use a assessment management platform with Schoology in 9 through 12. So while we never stop assessing in order to meet students' needs, we use FastBridge K8 and then AMP with Schoology in 9th through 12th grade.
And this next question from the same person is a very interesting one. I'm going to go back to the Scarborough Rope on this one. Wondering, how do you fill the exposure gap on Scarboroughs Rope? I think what the gentleman is asking there basically is, we know that some students come to us with more experiences with literacy than others. And obviously, the more literacy experiences that kids can have outside of school, in school, it's going to benefit them in the long run. But some students just can't help. Students can't help where they come and how many books they've had read to them or exposed to them in their homes. So how do we fill that gap? How do we support the kids? Because obviously, we want all of our students to grow as readers and perform well.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful question. And I think the one big piece of that exposure element is how we can do that early and often, K-5 especially. And so with our Sunday system for phonics, that's been a real undertaking of the district, that to that question of, our students come in at all different levels. How do we make sure our universal instruction meets all students' needs at every level? And so research shows that 95% of students who struggle with reading struggle with phonemic awareness and or phonics. And so the Sunday system really focuses on phonemic awareness and phonics for all grades, K-5, and it's also multisensory, meaning that it's students hear the sounds and words, they see the sounds and words, and they also touch the sounds and words. And what I mean by that is that with 2-finger tracing, when we're reading, students are encouraged to write those words on their lap, on a table, and those dendrites in your fingers actually move that information to your working memory. And so it's really about addressing phonemic awareness and phonics for all learning styles, for all cultural backgrounds. And so making sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students in front of us because of, various levels of exposure and background knowledge, and that we have the resources and instruction to support those differentiated needs.
All right, thank you for that. And I think one thing that we've had hit home with us in our training is that reading is not a natural process for people, right?
No, yeah, we're actually not hardwired to read. Teaching reading really is teaching rocket science. It's about connecting all of those synapses and helping students really, weave each of these strands. So making sure that we have the resources, the instruction, and the support to really help teachers be those rocket scientists for whatever those individual needs are of the students in front of them.
All right, thank you. Okay, we have some more questions. This is great. We appreciate your questions very much. What's your approach for students with poor visual or working memory? And then it says also kids with ADHD.
Yeah, the working memory part is huge. And so in the trainings that we do with our teachers, one of the areas of focus is executive functioning. And with that executive functioning, how do we move new learning to working memory? And so some of those things are specific to literacy, but some of those things are not. And so we talked a lot about, this summer with our teachers about games that we can play in our classroom to really, think about working memory and being very explicit with, how those rules help grow our brains and improve our working memory. And so some of those things, again, thinking through the instructional moves that we use with our literacy instruction help with that working memory, but also all of those executive functioning skills that we help to establish with our students in morning routines and, structures throughout the day are also a way in which we approach supporting students in that area as well.
And I think just to piggyback on what Jenna was talking about a little bit ago on that idea of tracing and the multisensory approach, I mean, that really has been shown that if we bring all those, if kids are seeing it, if they're touching it, if they're saying it, right, bringing all those different senses together really helps solidify and move that information from working memory to long-term memory. So I think with the adoption of Sunday, which there's another question. Yes, Sunday is new to the district this year for universal instruction, I should add. And so I think that will go a long way in helping kids in some of those areas as well.
Elizabeth, you always have that really great statistic or that number for students who may have more challenges with some of that working memory and how many repetitions it needs. I just always appreciate you sharing that information. I think it's always really helpful.
Sure. So research indicates that for typical learners, they need 12 to 24 exposures with something to get it into working memory. And then they need multiple 12 to 24 exposures to move that information into long-term memory. And those numbers just go up in terms of the number of exposure students need as students have some challenges. So students who struggle may need to hear things, 30 to 40 times to get it into working memory, and then multiple 30 to 40 times to move that into long-term memory. So that very direct, explicit instruction with lots of time for repetition and just hearing it, tracing it, as Jenna mentioned, all those things to just really make sure that it solidifies in their brain.
Thank you for that. We have a question here. Actually, the first comment was they're really happy that we've adopted a multisensory phonics program. But then, and this will tie to some of the questions and conversations we've been having with teachers and our principals, but wondering if there's research that shows that the program benefits our students who are jumping into the program like in 5th grade or later on. Obviously, we know that some of our students who are further along in our district, with it being a new program, they didn't have this at the younger ages when so much of this is important, of course. And says, does the program fill any gaps that exist with an older reader, for example, a 5th grader, due to the lack of a phonics program in their earlier grades?
Yeah, great question. And that's something that, we've been talking about with teachers, again, that, phonics and phonemic awareness has always been a focus at the K2 level, but that 3, 4, 5 level, while they have continued word study, might not have been explicitly phonemic awareness and phonics. And so Sunday does a great job of exactly to the point that Elizabeth was making about the repetitions of that. We don't move on with phonemic awareness or phonics lessons until 80% of our students are showing proficiency. So to your point about a 5th grader, when they're learning a new rule, right, a language rule, we teach that lesson, and the subsequent lessons every day has a new lesson with that same rule for about a week long is usually the 5 lessons that will focus on a particular rule. And so at the end of that week, if 80% of our students are not yet showing proficiency, we repeat those lessons. And it really is, again, about moving that to working memory. So instead of thinking about the phonics scope and sequence by month, right? We do this in August, we do this in September, we do this in October. Instead, we do it by skill. So we teach the skill until 80% of our students have met proficiency, and then we meet with that other 20% in small groups or with one-on-one more intensive instruction. And then that's how we decide when to move on to new skills. So exactly to the point of, 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders have not had these particular phonics rules early on in their career. We teach those skills until they show 80% proficiency before moving on. And so that's how we fill in those phonics gaps before introducing new language skills.
Thank you for that. And we do have, reading teachers at the middle school and high school level as well. But they admittedly serve fewer numbers of students because so many of the students, by the time they reach that point, are, as they say, they're not learning to read as much as they are reading to learn. But we know that all of us continue to grow. I grow as a reader every day, every year, I think. The more reading that I do, it's going to help me for sure. And so we do, I think we've already had some questions from parents in our previous session about middle school and high school. And so those are some conversations we're continuing, and we will continue going forward. I think it's important. Well, first of all, I'm going to let Liz chime in, because you have a 2nd grader, and you spent some time this summer engaging in some of the parent packs that are available through Sunday. Do you want to chime in about any of that and kind of what that looks like and where our parents can find the resources?
Yeah, so I think before sharing about the parent empowerment kit too, I think it's also important to note that I did engage in that kit with my son over the summer. I mean, we had a lot of time. The stresses of the school year were a lot more minimal. So just keep that in perspective, that the school year, is here, and that reading with your child every day is absolutely a great place to be if that is where you're at with your son or your daughter or your student. But I will share the parent empowerment kit is super simple to follow. It's very scripted. It actually ended up being fun. It was not laborious to engage in with my son. And I also felt like I had something to really support the work and the science of reading, because I, just like many others, I feel like, did not understand the complexities of phonemic awareness and phonics, word segmenting, all of those different pieces that are out, that are lined out in Scarboroughs Rope. So I found it to be really helpful, but also want parents to not feel, and families to not feel pressured by the parent empowerment kit that is available as well. So thank you for asking, Dr. Painter.
All right, now, sorry, I'm typing in. Let's see if I can do this. Add. That link right there goes to our website, and I will post it in a second while someone else is answering the next question. I'll post that onto our Facebook page as well. That link takes you to the parent empowerment kits through Sunday, just in case you want to at least look at them. But I agree with Liz on this. We're back in the school year, and our kids and our teachers are doing a lot of work already. And so please feel no pressure whatsoever to go in and do those with your families, with your kiddos at this time. Okay, so next question. Do you have any tips for at-home reinforcement or additional outside tutors? My son hates reading. I feel so bad for you. I've experienced that as a parent myself as well. And he feels like he's behind his class, and it's like pulling teeth to get him to engage. And so any tips on that from any of you? I'll start with Jenna.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just making reading fun, letting, your student choose the books, whatever level, whatever topic, that you deem appropriate. And just, reading often with your student, allowing the student to read to you, picture books at all ages. I taught high school for a while, and I would bring in picture books to reinforce a particular skill we were learning. And so just making it fun, making it light, letting it be practice and, a time to be together. And kind of same thing for writing. I often told students, tell the story and then let the words fall on the page. So don't worry about structures and spelling and grammar, right? It's writing is storytelling. And so, his favorite activity over the summer, right? Well, okay, tell me about it. And then how do we put that on the page? And so it's not about doing it right? It's not about doing it in being right or wrong with how you read or how you write. It really is just about engaging and practicing and building that confidence. So anyways, again, the parent empowerment kits are great, but we know that it's busy and the school year is, we have lots of other extracurricular activities and things going on. So the more that you can read and allow him to choose what you're reading. And again, storytelling is writing, and just really trying to take off the pressure and the formatting and feeling like there's a wrong way to do it will help to, build that confidence and, hopefully make it a little easier for him to engage in that type of work.
And just to piggyback, no matter what the age, read alouds are so important for kids. So even if you're reading together, but you are doing most of the reading, that is perfectly fine too. Or do some kind of turn taking where, your child reads just whatever amount they're comfortable with, or if they've picked a book that they're very interested in because it's a topic of interest for them, but it might be a difficult level for them, then you reading to them is just as good. It's a really important skill for them to hear fluent readers read as well. So whatever it takes to just make it fun and enjoyable and not like extra work at home is important.
I would also throw out from my experience as a dad, the graphic novels are great for some kids. Some people view those as kind of comic books, and I'm fine with that if you want to view it that way. But I do think that there are a lot of terrific graphic novels that have wonderful storylines, wonderful character development that are getting kids into books. And if it takes them less time to read than a thick novel that is super dense in text, then that's fine, because sometimes that kids need to feel like the book is accessible to them. And sometimes those dense pages with lots of text on them frighten us, or it's just too hard to stay focused on it, or believe that you can finish it even. And so totally get that. But I think graphic novels are one of those genres that have blown up over the last 5 to 10 years in a very positive way.
Yeah, and another thing, as you were saying that, Brian, it reminded me too, just like how much I love and rely on audiobooks. And so again, if your student, has kind of a hesitancy, encouraging audiobooks, whether that, having that student follow along is great, but just to hear the fluency of the reader. And that's always a great way to kind of introduce that idea of reading as fun, and that it doesn't have to be something that feels, as Elizabeth was saying, laborious and extra work.
Liz, not to put you on the spot, but can you kind of share some opportunities that some of our students may have for audiobooks or even or digital books through our partnership with St. Louis County Library?
Yeah, absolutely. I would be happy to. Through the work of Isaac Bjork, one of our curriculum facilitators, he has been able to loop us into and connect us with, it's called Connect Ed. It is a virtual library card that all of our students and our staff have access to. So any audiobook that would be on file in the St. Louis Public Library system, our students would have access and availability to that. We also have another really incredible program. It's called Learning Ally, which really allows us access to almost any audiobook that any child would need in the district. So two really great resources that parents have access to, and obviously our students have access to, but parents can also support their students with that access as well. And like Jenna said, it's a great resource for students sometimes that really enjoy that audio experience when they are reading.
And Connect or Learning Ally is at this point, it's available at the middle school and high school level, but they would need to talk to a teacher or the librarian about that, right?
Yes, that's correct. And so even though we have Access 612, we don't want any barrier to stand in the way of any child having access to an audiobook. So if a student would need that, we certainly would find a way to make sure that that child would have access to the book.
All right, thank you. I love this next question, and you all are going to love it too, I would imagine. Lots of focus, sounds like we're talking lots about phonics and reading, which makes total sense to this person, but wondering about focus on writing as well. Some students are strong readers, but that does not translate absolutely to strong writing as far as sentence construction, spelling, grammar, etc., especially in light of iPad use and spell check. Who wants this first? Because you could, and I know everybody could answer this one. Go for it, Jenna.
Yeah, no, I think those are great questions. And what's so interesting about phonics and phonemic awareness, if you think back to that slide that Dr. Painter shared at the beginning with kind of our comprehensive literacy framework, and how phonics and phonemic awareness and fluency and vocabulary and comprehension support both reading and writing. And so we often do think about phonemic awareness and phonics as reading skills, when in actuality they're writing as well. And so through the Sunday system, yes, they trace, again, using those that tactile learning for when we read sounds, but also they spell sounds and spell words. And with that, we use touch spelling. So every syllable gets a finger on your hand, and then those sounds come together to make the words. And so that helps with writing as well. So when they're reading, they would error correct or familiarize themselves with tracing. And then when they're writing, they are touch spelling. So that phonics resource is supporting both reading and writing. And to the piece of, sentence structures and grammar and spelling, they're writing not only words, but also sentences. And so that piece, again, those phonemic awareness and phonics skills support both when they're reading and as they're writing in their literacy blocks with with their classroom teachers. So what's important too is that Sunday is also the intervention that we use for both reading and writing. And so when a student has supplemental instruction or intensive instruction, they're using the same error correction, the tracing or the touch spelling outside of the classroom as they are inside of the classroom. So they're not having to kind of translate between, what they're getting in supplemental instruction and intensive instruction. And so all of that error correction, all of that tactile learning applies to both their reading and their writing in and outside of the classroom.
Yeah, just to piggyback on Jenna, I had one of those light bulb moments where you thought about something a lot, but it just didn't necessarily come together for you the same way as when we were preparing for some Sunday training with teachers. And really, spelling is where it all comes together for students. Because as Jenna mentioned, they have to first be able to identify the different chunks of sounds that are in a word they're trying to spell. So that's that phonemic awareness piece. And then they have to say, okay, now what letter or groups of letters make that sound. So then the phonics piece is coming in, and then can they write it? And so I had never really thought about it that way before, but I mean, spelling is really, is where it all comes together. And so even besides the Sunday system, in the younger grades where we use Haggerty as our resource for phonemic awareness, we're also thinking about where we're positioning that in the day. So maybe doing a phonemic awareness lesson right before we go to writing, so then kids have a chance to practice that. That's just one example. Of course, they're having opportunities to practice throughout the day, but just to kind of really pair those two together purposefully and make that connection. So we're excited that I hope we're going to see not just reading benefits, but we're going to see the writing benefits for sure.
I think it's important for us to mention, we talked early on about this 3-year comprehensive literacy plan. And we've spent a lot of time necessarily talking about Sunday system and our phonics instruction. But this planning is more than just that. Does anybody want to talk about some of the other exciting work we have going on and some of the things that we're doing in our K-5 classrooms around more comprehensive literacy?
Sure. So with reading and writing, again, this question was specifically about writing. The workshop model is really what we use when thinking about how we pull all of these pieces together, and how, the phonemic awareness and the phonics piece with Sunday is so important. And to Elizabeth's point, phonemic awareness specifically right before writing and kind of warming up those skills and bringing them to the forefront of our mind as we go into writing, but then allowing our writers to really get in the game. We talk a lot about how, practicing with the Sunday system is like going to an extracurricular practice, whether that's orchestra or, a sport or dance. But then it's when you get to the writing workshop, when you get to the reading workshop, it's game time, it's performance time. It's where you really get to show what you know and are able to do. And so when we think about comprehensive literacy, we think about those workshops, the reading workshop where students are choosing books and reading on their own and asking, themselves questions and jotting down notes about, the writer's moves and how they made that reading come to life. And then same thing for, the writing workshop, that yes, they've practiced those skills and now it's their time to shine and their time to apply and transfer those skills to their writing. And they're prompted by their classroom teachers, but really, they can tell their stories and they can share their ideas. Again, getting those ideas onto the page. And so it's really their time to get in the game and really, show what they know and are able to do. And so those workshop models are the time for our students to really kind of spread their wings and be able to apply what they've learned in that Haggerty and those Sunday sessions.
Liz, do you want to talk about some of the professional development that we have going on that's really exciting around literacy that's part of our big plan?
Yeah, I would be happy to. And again, I have to shout out to Jenna, as she has been one of our curriculum facilitators who has really done an incredible job of coordinating all of the details and the coaching that we are lining up for our teachers. So we are working with Jessica Garrison from the Literacy Link, and we have a really strong 3-year plan that's going to support our teachers with like modeling, with coaching, with the ability to follow up in real time around comprehensive literacy and also around our new resource, which is going to be, which is Sunday. And Jenna, I would pull on you to speak or add to that. You've done so much incredible work to coordinate Literacy Link to be in our district. So please share also what you have coordinated as well.
Sure. So the Literacy Link is supporting our students in each of our 5 buildings, or excuse me, our teachers in order to support students in each of our 5 buildings. And so the Literacy Link comes in several times each year for district-led professional development, where 4 of the Literacy Link consultants meet with small groups, share new information or review information about not only kind of the literacy instruction, but also the workshop model and kind of the logistics and the instructional support there. And then after those kind of larger level learning, they also will push into the buildings to help teachers at their grade levels. So what we've been doing is kind of, spending time in each of the 5 buildings. There are 2 consultants in particular who spend the majority of their time with our teachers in each of the 5 buildings, really kind of planning and thinking through the new information that was shared and how that can be implemented in the classroom with the students. And so those grade level meetings are happening now. And then once those planning meetings have happened, then they'll also kind of drill down even further to individual support for individual teachers. So if they've learned new information about conferring, for instance, within a workshop model, and then they've planned for that conferring, the Literacy Link consultants or myself might go in and model what that could look like. Teachers observe, ask questions, and then the consultants, myself, other teachers might come in and watch that teacher implementing that new skill or reviewed skill and offer feedback. And so it really is about offering that support in the classroom in real time for that learning that has happened at the district level. So we want to make sure that we're offering the newest research and information that teachers need in order to best meet the needs of their students, and then also support them with the planning and implementation of that learning. And so we're really excited to have Literacy Link on board to help us with that process. And I'm really excited about the learning and the instruction that's going on in all of our 5 buildings.
Yeah, a major shout out to our teachers who are in the midst of everything else that they're doing to support our kids and keep everybody safe. They are also diving into the learning head first. And even if you're a veteran teacher, some of what we're doing right now is new to us, and it is asking us to think differently about our kids and about how we support them as readers and writers. And I can't say enough about the work that our teachers are doing to support this work right now. And it's great to know that we've got this that's going to continue over time. This isn't just a short-term sort of effort that we have going on. This is a 3-year plan that is going to be supported along the way. I should also mention before we get to the next question that we are making a district-wide kind of systemic investment in making sure we have equitable text books available to students in our classroom libraries as well. And so we're making a pretty nice investment. It's not as much as we'd like maybe, but at least right now it's a good start to get additional classroom text in our classroom libraries that are right there for kids in their classrooms to be using in reading and writing workshop. Next question, how is homework changing for K-3 students within the new literacy plan? Anybody want to take that, or do you want me to jump in?
I'm happy to speak on that, but Brian, if you have something you want to share first, please feel free.
I mean, the main thing is we want our kids reading. The research shows at the elementary level that the most impactful homework that students can have is reading on a daily basis. And we encourage you to really support that work. There's also kind of a general rule. It's not like hard and fast, but a general rule is if you take your grade level and multiply it times 10 minutes, that's roughly how much homework you might have on a given night. And so if I've got a 4th grader, I might be ask them to be doing about 40 minutes of homework. And as a parent, as a teacher, as an educator, I'm totally cool if that's usually 40 minutes of reading. I'm also totally cool if you've got soccer practice and gymnastics and whatever else, and something went wrong with dinner or whatever. We're just trying to survive as a family on that given night. If you can't read for 40 minutes, that's okay too. But as a general rule, reading is really important every night if we can.
Yeah, I was going to say that exact same thing, that just, reading, having students feel more comfortable with reading, again, that kind of making reading fun, reading with your student, having your student read to you, all of those pieces. I think what's really important with this literacy plan is that the new information that's shared with students is happening in the classroom when they can be supported by teachers. And so it's not that we want them to, we want students to do new learning at home or, introduce a new skill where there's not the support of the classroom teacher or other, adults at school. And so that's not the goal. Again, the parent empowerment kits are great if you're looking for a resource like that. But again, it goes back to having your student read, you reading with your student, storytelling is writing, and just, supporting that work that your student will be doing inside their classroom.
I think another thing we've talked about, and I was starting to say, depending on the age of your student, but maybe not, is just, word games and rhymes and silly songs, and all of that is really important in that phonemic awareness piece. So anytime you can make a game, or you're driving in the car, my family, we spend a lot of time in the car, it seems like. So, they're finding letters of the alphabet, or that sign says stop. What other words can you make if you change the S to, a different sound, or the ST, change it to a CH, what word do you have? Just playing all those kind of games, counting, all those things are super great and can make it seem not so daunting and not so fun. Anyways to make that fun.
Absolutely. All right, next question, and this is a very timely one, actually. When will our various support levels be determined, and reading specialist meetings begin meeting with students who are needing it? So we just talked about benchmarking assessment earlier, and that universal screening process, which really the data meetings are just wrapping up right now around that. And so I think part of this is, if I have a child in the district, will I know if there's a problem? Will I know if there's some concerns at the teacher level? And when will our reading specialists start meeting with kids?
Well, I mean, exactly what Brian just said. So it's a little different timing in each of the buildings, but buildings are just now either finishing up or having those different grade level data meetings. And a big part of it is looking at classes and grade levels as a whole. We have something called the 80% rule, where we're looking at to see where the majority of our students are and what kind of instructional need they have. And if we see a larger than 20%, so if we see numbers in the 30s or 40% of our students have a similar need, then instead of having reading specialists try to figure out times of the day to see all those students, that support might come into the classroom, and it might mean some shifts and some changes in what the classroom teacher is doing as a whole with all the kids to be able to efficiently and effectively meet kids' needs. So it could happen a little different in different places depending on the needs of classrooms and grade levels. But I would say that if your student is someone who's going to work with a reading specialist, that for sure in the next week you'll be getting information from your school. But of course, as always, if you're wondering or have concerns, reaching out to your teacher and just asking is obviously a great thing to do.
Absolutely. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left. I'm just going to throw out a question that we got last time that had to do with if my student gets stuck on a word. If they're a perfectionist, they're reading and they don't want to move forward because they don't know a word, or conversely, I'm far from a perfectionist. I got this, but I'm making a lot of errors or mistakes in my reading. So what are some tips that you might have for parents who might experience that with their kids?
Yeah, great question. I have a 4-year-old, and so we're doing more letters and sounds than reading. But I've experienced both, where it's like, oh, I'm getting stuck on this, and we need to spend more time, or oh, I just flew past that, and actually that wasn't the correct sound for that particular letter. And so again, I go back to the tracing, the 2-finger trace. You can do this anywhere in the car, anywhere that you are. You can do the error correction. And often, what's important too is that maybe it's not an error correction, right? We really try to remind teachers that it's not, if we see it that it's incorrect, we don't say like, oh, well, we missed that one, we need to trace it. It really is about like, oh, let's trace. Right? Like, here's an opportunity, we get to trace. And it can be a word that's just not as familiar. Maybe it's not an error, but it's just something, it's a bigger word, or it's more sounds. And so tracing is literally with the 2 fingers. And let's say it's cat, and we would say k, a, t, cat. And then you'd want to repeat it 2 more times, cat, cat, to move it to working memory. And so really that's the error correction. That's it. And then if they go to that word again and it's a struggle, we trace it again. And you have more dendrites in these 2 fingers, more nerve endings than in the rest of your body. And so the more we can do tactile learning and tactile error correction, it moves that word or that sound to working memory more quickly. And same thing with writing. If they're writing and there's a word that's, more tricky or difficult, or maybe they know it, but it's just more unfamiliar, they touch spell. And by that, it's if it was mountain, you do it by syllable. So mountain, mountain. And they do that when it's unfamiliar. Again, you can do this in the car, on the way to a rehearsal or a practice, and then they write it after having touch spelled it. So again, just those simple error corrections, or again, not necessarily an error correction, but a word or sound that's more unfamiliar, helps to move that to working memory. And if that is the support that you can offer at home, that's huge, because whether your student is in kindergarten or whether your student is in 5th grade, those error corrections and those tactile learning movements are the same. And so that's something that, we can do anywhere and everywhere to help support our students.
All right, I'm going to shift one last question around writing, because we had some good questions about that as well. What if I have a child who is always wanting things sounded out for them? Or if they just get stuck and they kind of freeze up because I don't know how to spell this word, and so I'm not going to write it down. Kind of that balance between getting it right on the paper and just getting your ideas down. So which is more important, and how do I as a parent manage all of that?
Yeah, so from the literacy lens, what's most important is to get the idea down. So whether the spelling is correct or incorrect, the grammar correct or incorrect, if the idea is on the page, we can always go back and revise. And that's really what writing is. It's a revision process. So there's no wrong way to write. And so I think that's really important to stress with our students, that get the idea down on paper. We can always go back. Revision is an important part of the writing process. But if we don't have the ideas down on the page, we can't revise yet. So, if we're trying to get ideas out, it's not the time for revision. It's not the time for self-edit. It really is the time to share ideas. So that would be, from kind of the literacy lens, what's most important is to share those ideas and then follow the writing process.
Terrific. Thank you for that. I will also mention that our K-8 students all have access, because the community has been very, very supportive with this, to an iPad. And there are terrific tools, not just other apps, but the iPads themselves have some wonderful accessibility tools embedded that our teachers have been learning. Many of them have known about these, but Apple keeps improving these. And so there's a lot of tools that are embedded in their devices that can also support them with that. We also know that the actual writing process is very important as well. So it's not just about typing on our devices or doing speech to text, but those are some great tools that can help our students get their ideas down, like you were saying, Jenna, and then we can go back and do something with those later.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to say, or?
Oh, I was just going to reinforce the idea of the error correction. I know sometimes as a parent, it's like, oh, what if I don't do the error correction correctly? And again, there's no wrong way to do it, right? It's about like making learning tactile, having them feel it. So, you know, the example I gave with mountain, I even broke the sounds apart even further than just the syllables, right? So if you have a higher level student, maybe, you know, a fourth grader, you're saying mountain, but if you're a first grader, you're saying mountain, right? So it's just about like putting those tactile sounds to kind of a physical measure so that they can sound that out and write that word. So if you are trying out tracing with reading, or you are trying out touch spell with writing, there's really no wrong way to try to support your student in that kinesthetic tactile way. So it just, you know, is a great way to support what they're already doing with their teachers and peers in the classroom.
All right, well, it is 1 o'clock now, so I'm going to say thank you, first of all, to our guests, to our panelists. We really appreciate your insights, and you did a fantastic job of not only conveying some wonderful ideas, but I think also conveying the enthusiasm we have for this work, and our enthusiasm for the teachers and the great work that they're doing in our classrooms with kids on a daily basis, really on a minute-to-minute basis, because we know it's really hard work. And we appreciate them so much. And we know it's hard to be a parent right now. It's even harder to be a parent right now than maybe it is in normal times. So thank you to all of you out there who may be watching. We will take this video from Zoom, and we will add it to our district YouTube site and put it out there for people to watch at a later time if they want to. I know we didn't have tons of people watching, but we do appreciate those of you who did. And we really love your questions. And so we have one more session on at 6 p.m. on September 28th. If this was helpful to you, then tell your friends, because we'd love to have them. You can come back if you want, but the presentation is going to be the same unless we have different questions. And so thank you so much to everybody who have joined, and take care. Be well out there.